Okay, it's Wednesday night, May 20th. I'm going to see how this works. Due to the length of the material to be covered in this class and all the questions, I've decided to take a different approach than what I've been doing. I'm simply going to offer some thoughts regarding the material we're covering for the class. And I hope this approach will be helpful and perhaps a lot less tedious than what I've been doing. A very quick review to bring us to where we are. Chapter 16 in 1 Samuel is where Samuel anointed David as the next king to replace Saul. Chapter 17 is where David killed Goliath. Chapter 18 through 20 shows us how King Saul became suspicious of David and began trying to kill him. Chapter 21, the next several years, David spends as a fugitive, moving from place to place trying to avoid King Saul. This is a map. You probably can't see very much on that, so I'm going to blow it up and look at the southern portion first. We'll be focusing on this area. And so most of the time David stays within the borders of his own tribe of Judah, which is roughly this general area here. And on two occasions, however, he lives under Philistine jurisdiction, which is this region over here on down south a bit. But David's first stop is at Nob. He is escaping from Saul. So we are here in, if I can get my cursor back up here, we are here in this area. That's Saul's hometown of Gibeah. This is Ramah, which is Samuel's hometown. This is the city of Nob. This is David's hometown. So all this is close together. And so David flees to Nob on this occasion. And the tabernacle is now located there. This is a town, as you see, is just northeast of Jerusalem. And because David arrives alone, the high priest Ahimelech is concerned and wonders what's wrong. Well, David deceitfully replies that Saul has sent him on a secret mission. And then David asks for some food. Ahimelech gives David the showbread that has been replaced with fresh bread. And without going into all the details, that would not serve the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. It seems surprising after this, when David gets the bread and also the sword of Goliath, that he goes to Philistine territory to hide from King Saul. In fact, he goes to Gath, which was the very hometown of Goliath, whom he had killed. Gath was about 30 miles, you can see here on the map, about 30 miles southwest of Saul's residence in Gibeah. When David is recognized, he pretends to be insane. In chapter 22, David then goes to the cave of Adullam. He's fearful of his reception there in Philistia. I keep having trouble getting my cursor up here. But here's Adullam here, and the valley of Elah, where David killed Goliath, is right here in this area. And so it's likely that he passed through that valley to get to the cave of Adullam to hide out. And about 400 disgruntled men come and join David. And this would serve as an excellent preparation for eventually ruling the land. He also, in this chapter, becomes concerned for the welfare of his parents, and he has them moved to Moab for a while. Moab is down here, this area. Not sure exactly where he would have located them, but he gets permission from the king of Moab. Since David now has a fighting force of men, Saul becomes concerned about a conspiracy against his life. And Saul learns that David had gone to Nob, geographically back here again, if I can. Why is I'm having so much trouble with that cursor? There it is. And so he learns that David had gone to Nob and that the high priest had assisted him, the high priest named Ahimelech. And in Saul's irrationality, he goes and has has 85 priests slaughtered that day. But then he doesn't stop there. He also has the whole town of Nob slaughtered. One of the high priest's sons, named Abiathar, escapes and goes to David. He takes the ephod with him and the Urim and the Thummim, and he uses it to inquire of the Lord for David from time to time, as the account will continue to reveal. David's also made aware that his own actions caused the death of these priests, and he's very sorrowful about that. There's not really a lot said about the significance of this event, of what Saul did, but this would have been a watershed moment in Saul's life. He's just slaughtered 85 priests of the Lord. In his effort to secure his kingdom, he's now waged warfare on the foundational element of the nation. In essence, he's waged war on the Lord by slaughtering his priests, showing that he's willing to do anything to secure his kingdom. When the men refused to slaughter the priests, this spoke volumes about the lack of trust and the lack of respect that Saul brought on himself that day. The rest of 1 Samuel is a game of cat and mouse with King Saul trying to locate and kill David. And so we move into chapter 23. During the time David is a fugitive, he protects the cities of Judah from their enemies. He continues to win victories over the Philistines. We're told that he saves the city of Keilah, which is here, very close to Adullam, which is where he'd been hiding out. And by inquiring of the Lord, David learns that the people will, after he helps defend the city of Keilah, he learns by inquiring of the Lord that the people will give him up into the hands of King Saul. So David flees to the wilderness, or to the desert of Ziph, which is down here. Here's Keilah, here's Adullam. He flees down here to this is Ziph. And the desert, the wilderness of Ziph, would be in that general area. Jonathan somehow manages to come to David and encourage him, but the people of Ziph are eager to help Saul capture David, so they provide Saul with David's location. And it's ironic that Saul thanks them by saying, "The Lord bless you for your concern for me." When David learns of the betrayal, he escapes to the wilderness, or the desert of Maon, which is further south. Come on, cursor. There it is. There's Maon, and we're going to meet Nabal here in a few minutes, who lives there. But the desert would have been in that general area as well. And so Saul prepares to take David when he finds out that he's escaped down there. He prepares to take David and his men, but he learns that the Philistines are attacking the land, so he has to turn his attention to that issue. Then David and his men escape to the caves of En-Gedi, which are, he now goes to the east. Come on. Okay, sorry. I'm getting frustrated with this cursor not showing up. There it goes again. There it is. Okay, so he's in Ziph, and he goes over to En-Gedi. And that's the general area there. And En-Gedi means spring of the goats because of the excellent water source that's located there. And so this would be an excellent place for David and his men to hide. Chapter 24 continues the account from chapter 23. King Saul comes to this area, to En-Gedi, and he goes into a cave to relieve himself, and David and his men are hiding in the cave. And David has the opportunity to kill King Saul, but he spares him instead. And what he does is he cuts off a piece of his robe. Then when King Saul leaves the cave, David comes out and calls out to the king and shows him the piece of his robe, proving that he's not trying to kill him. David then appeals to the Lord regarding who's the righteous one between the two of them. The text reveals that Saul is remorseful for how he's treating David. He verbalizes that David will receive the kingdom, and he asks David to be kind to his descendants when this happens. He promises not to harm David. Well, David promises that he will not harm Saul's family when he is made king, but he knows that he can't trust Saul regarding the promise not to kill him. So chapter 25 tells of David going down to the area of Maon. And this chapter tells the story of David and a man named Nabal and his wife Abigail. Nabal lived in Maon, and his business was in Carmel, or Carmel. Now you're familiar with an account later, Mount Carmel, which is way up here to the north. This is a different location. And so David and his men had served as watchmen over Nabal's herdsmen and flocks, and so David sends men to ask Nabal to give them supplies because they watched over his herdsmen. But Nabal speaks harshly to the men, and David decides to destroy the man and his family for this treatment. But Abigail, Nabal's wife, meets David as David is on the way to do this deed. She brings food. She humbly asks David to spare Nabal's life. Then though David was ready to bring harm, this account accentuates the difference between him and King Saul. He listens to the counsel of a woman, and he refuses to punish and take matters into his own hands. Instead, he allows the Lord to settle the matter. After Abigail tells her husband about what she did, he suffers what's possibly a stroke or a heart attack, and he dies about 10 days later. Since Abigail is released from her husband, David takes her as wife. In chapter 26, we learn that Saul's promise not to harm David was worthless. He tracked David down in the wilderness or the desert of Ziph, which is here again north of Maon. So David's gone back to this area. David is given another opportunity to kill Saul, and once again he refuses to do so. Saul again acknowledges his wrong and implies that David will eventually be king, but chapter 27 shows that Saul's second promises were no better than his first. He once again comes after David, but David escapes and finds refuge in Philistine territory this time. He goes over to the west into Philistia. And of course, this was risky because the Philistines might kill him or the Israelites might consider him a traitor, but he goes anyway. And he learns valuable information about their military tactics. He learns about iron working rather. And he also makes friends with some of the Philistines, and all these will benefit him later as king. David now has 600 men with him, and he convinces Achish, who's the king of Gath. Cursor, come on, cursor. Open sesame or something. Well, this is fun. I could point at it, but nobody would see my finger. Anyway, so we're here in Gath, and he convinces Achish, king of Gath, to consider him an ally. And since Saul was trying to kill David, this may not have been too difficult to do, and to convince the man that David had turned against Israel. And so David is allowed to live in a town called Ziklag, which is down here. And David convinces the Philistines he's going up and raiding Israelite territories when he's in fact destroying Israel's enemies. Achish believes that David is completely turned against the Israelites. The Amalekites were one of the peoples that David fought. And I'll just go north-south from Ziklag because my cursor's not showing up. You see the Amalekites down at the bottom on the left. And whenever he attacked a town, he left no survivors who could inform the Philistines about what David was really doing. But in this case, apparently he was not able to do so, because in chapter 30, just a few chapters from here, we're going to see that David apparently failed on this occasion to completely destroy the Amalekites, because they come and attack Ziklag. Then chapter 28 has the Philistines assembling their troops in the valley of Jezreel up to the north. Let me switch maps here. Get us acclimated. Here's Gibeah again. This is Nob. Gath is down here. Ziklag way down here. And so the valley of Jezreel is up here, and Saul, the Israelites are gathered at Mount Gilboa towards the eastern end of the valley, which is here. And so this is the general area that they're planning to have war. Saul is terrified, and he consults a medium. God allows Samuel to be called up from the dead, and Samuel tells King Saul that he will be killed by the Philistines the next day. Saul is obviously overwhelmed. And so the following day, chapter 29 now, the following day when the Philistines are preparing to go to battle against the Israelites, the other leaders of the Philistines complain about David's presence. They question his loyalty, and they were wise to do so. David is told to leave. He acts surprised and hurt, but I'm convinced that he was relieved that he was not going to have to be in that position to either fight his own people or turn against the Philistines. In chapter 30 then, while David is with the Philistines up north, the Amalekites decide to get revenge on David for attacking them previously. Takes us back to the previous map. And so the Amalekites come and they attack the city of Ziklag, and they burn it, and they take all the women and children captive. When David returns, Abiathar the priest inquires of the Lord, and David determines that he can overtake the raiders. So David and his men are victorious, and they bring back their families and a lot of spoils of war. In chapter 31, back to this map, Saul fights the Philistines in the valley of Jezreel up north there. And God has abandoned Saul, and so 3 of his sons are killed. Jonathan is one of those who are killed. The only one son that survives is Ishbosheth. And in the next book, 2 Samuel, he's going to briefly serve as the next king. Somehow King Saul's leading general, Abner, also lives through the battle, and he'll be a key player for a few chapters in 2 Samuel as well. Saul himself is critically wounded in this chapter, the last chapter of 1 Samuel, and he asks his armor bearer to finish killing him, but his armor bearer refuses to do so, and Saul falls on his own sword and takes his life. The Israelites abandon their cities and they flee, and this allows the Philistines to take full control of the whole region. Starting in 2 Samuel, we'll see David becoming king partially, while Saul's son Ishbosheth continues to reign, and we'll see the developments from there. We're going to cover another 10 chapters next week, and I'll take this same approach. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to contact me by email, by text, by phone, by carrier pigeon or drone, or whatever is your preferred method of contact.